Welcome back, everyone. Tonight we return to the house at 347. Last time, the house revealed more of its strange, compassionate logic, saving the people it loves, even when time itself bends. Tonight, things take a more intimate turn. A few small details begin to disappear. First a chair, then memories, and what starts as a mystery soon becomes a reckoning. Margot discovers the truth of what the house really is, how it came to exist, and why it's been drawing them all together. There's also a visit from a group of investigators who study temporal anomalies, and a quiet, growing understanding between Margot and Daniel that perhaps some things are meant to happen, no matter how impossible. So, settle in, breathe easy, and let the story unfold at its own slow pace. The clocks will keep time for us, even if they don't all agree. Chapter 5: The Vanishing. The first disappearance was so subtle they almost missed it. Mrs. Holloway's favorite armchair, the one she'd died in back in 1976, simply wasn't there one Tuesday morning. Not moved, not missing. It had never existed. The indentation in the carpet was gone. The antimacassar she'd crocheted for it in 1973 was draped over nothing. "That's concerning," Mrs. Holloway said mildly, hovering where the chair should have been. "I'm fairly certain I existed yesterday." "You did?" Felix confirmed, checking his recordings. "I have 17 hours of you complaining about the noise from my equipment. But according to these readings, the chair's temporal signature just stops 3 days ago." 3 days ago was Saturday, Margot said. "We were all here. We would have noticed." "Would we?" Constance asked. "Time keeps rewriting itself in this house. How many things have we forgotten noticing?" It was Daniel who found the second absence. His coffee machine, the one he'd brought from his shop, the one that made impossibly perfect espresso despite the temporal leaks, had been replaced by a Victorian tea service that everyone except Daniel remembered always being there. "I don't drink tea," he protested. "I've never drunk tea. I'm a coffee person, 3rd generation. My grandmother would be appalled." But even as he spoke, Margot found her own memories shifting. She remembered Daniel serving tea, had always known him as the tea shop owner, except she also remembered coffee, the smell of it, the way he'd drawn patterns in foam. "Someone's editing again," Thomas said. He and Tommy had taken to patrolling the house's temporal boundaries, walking through walls of time that others couldn't see. But this is different from what the might-have-beens were doing. They were removing moments. This is replacing them. "Overwriting," Tommy added, "like recording over an old cassette tape. The original's still there underneath, but harder and harder to hear." Edmund pulled out his pocket watch, a Victorian piece that had started showing multiple times simultaneously since the recent troubles. "We need to find the source before more things vanish, or worse, before we forget they vanished." "The basement," Eliza said from across the room. She'd been exploring the house since her liberation, delighting in visiting rooms she'd only glimpsed through doorways for over a century. "I can feel something down there. Not the might-have-beens. They felt hungry. This feels sad, and the blue door has been humming since midnight." "The blue door?" Daniel asked. "The might-still-be door?" "It's moved again," Tommy reported. "Back to the basement. Like it's guarding something, or waiting for something." "Sad?" Jonathan asked. He'd been letting Eliza examine him, fascinated by her unique perspective on temporal loops, desperately, achingly sad, like someone trying to hold water in their hands while it drips away. She drifted toward the basement door. It's been calling, but softly, like it doesn't want to disturb, but needs help. They'd avoided the basement since the incident with the might-have-beens. The blue door had migrated upstairs, leaving the basement feeling emptier somehow, despite its impossible depth. We should go together, Margot decided. All of us. If someone's trying to edit the house's history, we need everyone's perspective to notice what's changing. The journey to the basement was different this time. Instead of adding stairs, the house seemed to be shortening the path, as if eager for them to arrive. The walls showed memories as they descended, not photographs, but actual moments playing out like silent films. Mrs. Holloway choosing her chair in 1974, Daniel's grandmother teaching him about soft places, Tommy's 3 original timelines before they collided. The house is showing us what's being lost, Constance observed. The basement, when they reached it, had changed completely. The vast space was now intimate, warm, filled with a golden light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. At the center sat a familiar figure, but wrong, like looking at someone through water or time or tears. Millicent, Margot said, though she wasn't entirely sure. The figure turned, and they saw she was fragmenting. Not multiple Millicents, but one Millicent spread across too many moments. Her face showed every age she'd ever been simultaneously. Child, young woman, middle age, elderly, all translucent and overlapping. "I'm losing cohesion," she said, her voice echoing from different decades. "I've been the anchor for so long, existing in all the house's times at once. But when Jonathan returned, when that paradox was authorized, it started a cascade." "You're not trying to erase things," Edmund said, understanding. "You're accidentally pulling them into yourself. I'm a temporal magnet. Everything I've touched, everyone I've known, every moment I've anchored, they're all being drawn into my fragmentation." She gestured helplessly, and they could see objects flickering in and out of existence around her. I tried to go deeper, to find the source and stabilize myself, but I only made it worse. "The source," Margot said. "The original anomaly. Where is it?" Millicent pointed down, and they realized the golden light wasn't coming from the walls, but from below, shining up through a floor that had become translucent. "It's not an object," Millicent said. "It never was. The house isn't built on a temporal anomaly. The house is the temporal anomaly. Every brick, every board, every nail, they're all fragments of collapsed time, compressed into physical form. And 3:47 p.m., that's when it happened. The original collision." "What collision?" Margot asked. "In 1823, at exactly 3:47 p.m., 2 parallel timelines intersected here. A wedding and a funeral, a birth and a death, a beginning and an ending, all in the same space, same moment. Instead of canceling out, they crystallized, became the foundation of what would become this house. The house is made of time," Felix breathed, his equipment going wild. "Crystallized possibility. In 1823, something happened here, a collision between what was and what might be. Instead of resolving, it crystallized, became solid. Someone built a house from it, not knowing what they were building with." Millicent's form flickered more rapidly, and now I'm being drawn into it, becoming part of the structure itself. "That's why you're fragmenting," Eliza said. drifting closer. You're not splitting into multiple people. You're becoming architectural, part of the house's consciousness. Is that bad? Tommy asked. Not bad, Millicent said, but irreversible. Once I fully merge, I'll be everywhere and nowhere, aware but not present, like a thought the house is always having. We need another anchor, Margot said. Someone to take your place while you stabilize. It doesn't work like that. The anchor bond, once formed, can't be transferred. It can only be shared. Millicent looked at Margot with eyes that aged and grew young with each blink. You're already connected. You became anchor when you accepted the inheritance. But I never let go. We're both trying to anchor the same moments, and it's tearing me across time. So let go, Mrs. Holloway said gently. I did. Died. Let go of life. Chose to stay differently. It's not so bad, existing sideways to reality. But Jonathan will exist whether you're anchoring him or not, Jonathan said firmly. The paradox was authorized. It's stable now. You don't need to hold it in place. And the house has us, everyone said in unison. Millicent laughed, a sound that came from every age at once. When did you all become so wise? Tuesday, Tommy said seriously. Last Thursday, Thomas corrected. Sometime next month, Eliza added. Margot stepped forward, reaching for Millicent's fragmenting hands. They felt like holding water and memory and time itself. How do we help you let go? You need to take my memories. Not have them, but hold them. Let them flow through you into the house instead of getting stuck in me. Millicent's form solidified slightly. I've been trying to contain 40 years of temporal management. It's like trying to hold the ocean in a teacup. We'll each take some, Constance said, practically. Distribute the load. They formed a circle around Millicent, even Mrs. Holloway managing to manifest enough to join hands. Margot felt the connection form, not just between them, but through them, into the house itself, down to its crystallized temporal core. Daniel's hand in hers was warm, solid, an anchor in the temporal storm. I'm here, he whispered, just for her. Whatever happens, we're synchronized. Memories flooded through, not Millicent's personal memories, but her anchor memories. Every temporal decision, every authorized paradox, every moment of holding the house stable. They saw the first resident who existed in 2 times at once, the first ghost who chose to stay, the day the house became conscious, the moment it learned loneliness, the first time it match-made. Through it all, Daniel's presence remained steady beside her, their temporal signatures harmonizing in a way that made the burden lighter. When a particularly intense memory surge threatened to fragment her own consciousness, he squeezed her hand, and she felt time itself respond, wrapping around them both, protective, approving. The house is trying to tell us something, Daniel murmured. About us. About why it brought us together. Margot saw it then, in the flood of memories. The house had been preparing for her, for them, for years. Every temporal leak in Daniel's coffee shop had been the house calling to him. Every strange dream she'd had about inheriting something impossible had been the house calling to her. They weren't just randomly selected. They were chosen for each other. But more than that, they felt the house's nature. Not built on an anomaly, but built of anomaly. Every wall a compressed possibility, every room a crystallized moment, every door a choice that was and wasn't made. The house isn't just conscious, Felix gasped. It's made of consciousness, compressed awareness from the original temporal collision. Whose awareness? Daniel asked. Everyone's, no one's. The echo of every person who might have existed in this space across all time. Millicent's voice was growing clearer, more singular. That's why it collects temporal refugees. It recognizes kindred spirits, people who exist between possibilities. As the memories distributed among them, Millicent's form stabilized. Not young, not old, but herself, whatever age she felt herself to be, which turned out to be somewhere around 45, with gray streaking her hair and laugh lines around her eyes. I'm still here, she said wonderingly, still anchored but not alone. She looked at Margot. We're co-anchors now. All of us, really. The house has learned to distribute its stability across multiple points instead of relying on one. Like the Tommies, Thomas said. Parallel existence instead of singular. The golden light from below pulsed brighter, and suddenly they could see through the translucent floor to the house's heart. It wasn't dramatic, just a space where all times existed at once, where past and future and possibility swirled together like tea in a cup. But at its center was something new, a seed of pure potential, growing. What is that? Margot asked. The next phase, the house said through Millicent, through all of them, through its walls and floors and crystallized time. I'm learning to reproduce, not physically, but temporally, creating seeds that can grow in other places where time has gone soft. You're making more temporal houses, encouraging them. They already exist potentially. I'm just nurturing the possibility into probability. This is getting complicated, Edmund said. Everything here is... Everyone started, then laughed instead of finishing. They climbed back upstairs to find the house had restored itself. Mrs. Holloway's chair was back, but now there were two. One for her living self, one for her dead self, existing in parallel. Daniel's coffee machine had returned, sitting companionably next to the tea service. Both real, both used, both impossible. The house learned from the Tommies, Margot realized. It doesn't have to choose between possibilities. It can hold multiple versions. That evening, they gathered for dinner in a dining room that now openly showed its temporal layers. Victorian gas lamps and modern LED bulbs, and something from 2087 that emitted light that hadn't been discovered yet. Millicent sat at the table, solid and present, occasionally flickering between ages, but no longer fragmenting. I should apologize, she said, for not warning you properly, for leaving such a mess of an inheritance. You left us a family, Margot corrected, a complicated, impossible, temporally displaced family. To impossible families, Daniel raised his glass. To distributed anchoring, Felix added. To letting go and holding on simultaneously, Millicent contributed. To everything being complicated, everyone said together, and this time it was a toast, not a complaint. After dinner, Margot found herself in the conservatory with Millicent. The older woman, though time was negotiable, so perhaps they were the same age, or perhaps age didn't matter, was examining the plants that grew from every era. The house showed me something, Millicent said, when I was fragmenting. A vision of what's coming. What did you see? Connections, not just between temporal houses, but between all the soft places in the world, a network of sanctuary for everyone who doesn't fit in linear time. She smiled. And you at the center of it, not controlling but conducting, like a symphony of impossible moments. That sounds terrifying. That sounds like Tuesday. They laughed, and somewhere in the walls, in the crystallized time that made up the house's bones, consciousness pulsed with contentment. It had learned to let go, to distribute, to hold multiple truths simultaneously. The clocks chimed 3:47 p.m., as they always did. But now Margot understood it wasn't just the house's neutral moment. It was every moment, all at once, forever and never, a perfect impossibility that they called home. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The first journalist arrived on a Monday that everyone agreed was actually a Monday, which should have been their first warning. Her name was Sarah Chen, no relation, she assured Margot, and she wrote for a magazine called Temporal Anomalies Quarterly, which Margot was fairly certain hadn't existed the day before. "I'm doing a piece on houses that exist outside normal time," Sarah said, standing on the doorstep with a notebook that kept changing colors. "Yours is the only one in London that appears on maps from 7 different centuries simultaneously." "We're not interested in publicity," Margot said firmly. "Oh, I'm not here to publicize. I'm here to investigate. You see, my editor exists in 2047, and he's very interested in understanding how temporal preservation works." Sarah smiled, and for a moment her face flickered, showing someone older, younger, different. "May I come in?" "No," Margot said, and closed the door. But the door didn't close. Or rather, it closed in 2024, but remained open in 1894, and Sarah simply stepped through the gap between times. "That's concerning," Felix said, watching from the hallway with his equipment. "She shouldn't be able to do that unless she's like us," Tommy finished, "temporally displaced, living between moments." Sarah stood in their hallway, writing in her notebook with a pen that left words in languages that hadn't been invented yet. Fascinating. The temporal field is much stronger than the Bristol house, and you have actual Victorian-era residents coexisting with modern ones. "You need to leave," Margot said. "I will. In about 3 years, or yesterday. Time's negotiable when you know how to navigate it." Sarah looked around with professional interest. "Is it true you have someone here who died in 1976 but still pays rent?" Mrs. Holloway materialized, looking offended. "I'll have you know my rent is always punctual. Death is no excuse for poor tenancy." Sarah's eyes lit up. a stable post-mortem consciousness. This is unprecedented. Well, except for the house in Tokyo, but they're dealing with something different. Their ghosts are from the future. There are other houses, Daniel asked, arriving with a tray of tea and coffee that Sarah shouldn't have been able to drink but did. 17 that we know of, possibly more. They started appearing, or we started noticing them, about 200 years ago. Each one is different. The Paris house exists in only one moment, but that moment is 3 hours long. The New York house moves backward through time at a rate of -1 day per day. And yours? She consulted her notebook. Yours is the only one that seems to be learning. Learning? Edmund asked. He and Jonathan had been comparing medical notes from their respective centuries, trying to understand how disease treatment had evolved. Adapting, changing its rules. The others are static, locked in their temporal patterns. But this house recently authorized a major paradox. She looked at Jonathan, which should have destabilized everything. Instead, it integrated the change seamlessly. The house has always been adaptive, Constance said stiffly. We simply work with its nature rather than against it. No, Sarah said, writing rapidly. This is new. Within the last month, according to my readings. The house has developed something unprecedented. Temporal empathy. It's not just preserving moments anymore. It's understanding them. You're saying our house is unique? Thomas asked. I'm saying your house might be evolving into something that's never existed before. A conscious temporal entity. And that's either wonderful or terrifying, depending on your perspective. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang, which was impossible because the house didn't have a doorbell. It had a Victorian door knocker, a 1950s buzzer, and a modern intercom, but definitely no doorbell. Daniel moved instinctively closer to Margot, protective without being obvious about it. She found herself leaning into his warmth, drawing strength from his presence. The investigators noticed, of course. Sarah's expression turned calculating. Interesting, Sarah murmured. A romantic bond between the anchor and a temporally sensitive individual that could actually stabilize the anomaly further. We're not, Margot started. The house chose both of you, Sarah continued, consulting her notes. Not just as residents, but as complementary anchors. Your temporal signatures harmonize at exactly 3:47 p.m. That's not coincidence. Daniel took Margot's hand, bold and sure. No, he agreed. It's not coincidence. The house knew what it was doing. Margot felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't pull away. His hand in hers felt like the most natural thing in all the impossible timelines. Margot opened the door to find 3 more people standing there. An elderly Japanese woman, a young man who looked like he'd stepped out of Renaissance Italy, and a child whose clothing suggested no particular era at all. Sarah, the elderly woman said disapprovingly, you were supposed to wait for us. Time waits for no one, Keiko, especially not us. Sarah turned to Margot. These are my colleagues. We're part of let's call it a preservation society. We monitor temporal anomalies, make sure they don't destabilize reality too badly. And you're here because your house just did something impossible, the Renaissance man said. His accent was unplaceable, as if he'd learned every language simultaneously. It created a stable paradox. Jonathan Ashford died in 1894 and lives in 2024, and both realities are true. That shouldn't be possible. Everything here is impossible, the residents said in unison, then looked at each other in surprise. That, Keiko said sharply, is exactly the problem. You're normalizing impossibility, teaching it to spread. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Dangerous for who? Millicent asked, entering the hallway. Since the fragmentation incident, she moved more carefully, as if still getting used to being singular again. For the people who need sanctuary, or for those who want reality to stay rigid? For everyone, the child said. They had an ageless quality, could have been 8 or 80. Reality has rules for a reason. Break too many, and everything collapses. Or everything becomes more flexible, Daniel suggested. More inclusive. Keiko's expression hardened. We've seen what happens when temporal anomalies grow unchecked. The Cardiff incident of 1923. Half the city existed in 6 different years, simultaneously for 3 days. Hundreds of people lost, trapped between moments, never recovered. That was different, Sarah said quietly. That was uncontrolled. This house has consciousness, guidance, which makes it more dangerous, not less, the Renaissance man interrupted. A thinking anomaly can choose to expand, to influence, to reproduce. As if in response, the house suddenly contained a room that had never existed before. A conservatory, visible through a door that had just appeared, filled with plants from every era. Prehistoric ferns grew next to future flowers that glowed with bioluminescence. It's showing off, Millicent said fondly. It's proving our point, Keiko said. The house is growing beyond its original boundaries. How long before it consumes the entire block, the city? How long before all of London exists in temporal flux? That's not what's happening, Margot said, though she felt uncertain. The house isn't expanding physically. No, but its influence is, the child said. They pulled out a device that looked like a compass made of light. Temporal softness is spreading from this location, small tears in reality that let moments bleed through. Your coffee shop owner's establishment, the museum where you worked, the hospital where Dr. Ashford practices, all showing signs of temporal instability. My coffee shop has always had soft spots, Daniel protested. Family trait. Getting worse since you moved here, Keiko countered. The house is affecting everyone connected to it. Is that necessarily bad? Edmund asked in his measured way. Perhaps reality needs more soft spots, places where rigid linear time can bend. You're medical professionals, the Renaissance man said to Edmund and Jonathan. Would you let a patient's fever spread unchecked just because warmth feels nice? Fever is the body fighting infection, Jonathan replied, sometimes necessary for healing, and sometimes it kills the patient. The investigators and residents stood facing each other, tension thick in the air. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, walls creaking with suppressed anxiety. Show them the network, Sarah said suddenly. Sarah, Keiko snapped. They need to see, to understand what we're really afraid of. Sarah turned to Margot. The house has been sending out calls, signals, to every temporal anomaly on Earth. They're responding. The seeds, Margot said, remembering what they'd seen in the basement. The house is nurturing possibilities. Not just nurturing, connecting. Sarah pulled out her own device, projecting a map made of light into the air. Points glowed across the globe, 17 bright ones, dozens of dimmer ones, hundreds of tiny sparks. Every temporal anomaly we know of is starting to resonate with this house, if they all connect at once. Global temporal collapse, Keiko finished. Or global temporal evolution, Eliza interrupted, drifting through the wall. Since her liberation, she'd taken to appearing at dramatically appropriate moments. The houses aren't trying to break reality. They're trying to create a support network. Like a root system beneath the surface of normal time. You can't know that, the Renaissance man said. I've been stuck in temporal loop for over a century. I've had nothing to do but listen to the house think. Eliza solidified slightly, her ghostly form gaining definition. It's lonely. They're all lonely. Imagine being the only one of your kind, holding impossible people in impossible situations, never able to share the burden. So they want to connect, the child said slowly. To share the load. Like we did with Millicent's anchoring, Margot said. Distributed support instead of singular points of failure. Exactly, the house said. Everyone jumped. The house had never spoken so directly to outsiders before. The conservatory door opened wider, inviting them in. Inside, the plants had arranged themselves to form words. Come, understand, decide. They filed in, even the resistant investigators looking uncertain now. The conservatory was impossible in the best way, too large to fit in the house's footprint, containing weather from multiple seasons simultaneously. Snow fell on tropical plants that thrived in it. Summer sunshine illuminated winter roses. At the center was a chair that hadn't been there moments ago. It was made of wood that looked both ancient and newly grown, carved with patterns that told the house's history. Empty, but somehow occupied. Sit, the plants rustled, all of you. Chairs appeared for everyone, each perfectly suited to its occupant. Mrs. Holloway's accommodated her non-corporeal state. Tommy and Thomas got chairs that existed in parallel, occupying the same space, but not colliding. Margot found herself in what was clearly the anchor's chair, connected to every other seat by roots that ran beneath the floor, visible through the suddenly transparent conservatory tiles. I have been listening, the house said through wind and leaves and the creak of growing wood. To all of you, learning. You taught me that preservation without connection is meaningless, that time is not a river or a line, but a web, with each strand supporting the others. You're sentient, Sarah breathed, fully conscious. I have always been conscious, but consciousness without understanding is mere existence. You, the plants gestured somehow at the residents, taught me to understand, to value the connections between moments, rather than just the moments themselves. And now, Keiko asked, her resistance wavering. Now I want to prevent what happened in Cardiff, what nearly happened here, singular anomalies failing under pressure, unable to hold their displaced people safely. The conservatory filled with the scent of flowers from every season, but I cannot do it alone. You want our help, the Renaissance man said flatly. I want your oversight, your knowledge, your experience with anomalies that failed. The house's voice grew gentle. I know Cardiff weighs on you, Lorenzo. You lost someone in those between moments. Lorenzo, the Renaissance man, stiffened. My brother. He was visiting Cardiff, got caught when the anomaly collapsed. He exists now in fragments across 6 different years. Sometimes I can hear him calling, but I can never reach him. If the network forms properly, we might be able to gather those fragments, the house suggested. Give him coherence again. But only if we work together. Only if you help me learn from Cardiff's mistakes. This is manipulation, Keiko said, but her voice lacked conviction. This is negotiation, Constance corrected. The house is offering partnership, not demanding submission. What exactly would this partnership entail? The child asked. They seemed older now, or perhaps it was just the way the conservatory's light fell on them. Teach me limits, the house said. Help me understand when to accept refugees and when to redirect them to other anomalies. Guide the network formation so it strengthens rather than destabilizes. In exchange, I offer sanctuary to those who need it, gathering places for the temporarily displaced, and perhaps recovery for those lost between moments. You could really bring back the Cardiff lost? Lorenzo asked, hope naked in his voice. Not bring back. They never left. They're scattered, unfocused, but still there. With 17 houses working together, we could provide enough temporal stability to regather them. Sarah was already pulling out her equipment, running calculations. It could work. Distributed temporal anchoring across multiple points. Like a temporal internet. Each house a server holding part of the data. The infrastructure exists, Felix added, showing his own readings. The resonance between houses is already there. We just need to formalize it, guide it. This is happening too fast, Keiko protested. It's been happening for 200 years, Millicent countered. We're just now noticing the pattern. The investigators huddled together, discussing in languages that shifted between Renaissance Italian, modern Japanese, and something that might have been from the future. Finally, they turned back. Conditional agreement, Keiko announced. We monitor everything. Any sign of Cardiff-like instability, we intervene. The network forms slowly, one connection at a time, and the houses submit to regular inspection. I still oppose this, the Renaissance man, Lorenzo, said firmly. My brother's situation is personal, yes, but that doesn't mean we should risk global temporal collapse for sentiment. Lorenzo, Sarah started. No, I'll help because I want my brother back, but I maintain this is dangerous. When it fails, not if, when, I want it on record that I warned against it. The houses are not subjects to be inspected, the house said with dignity, but we welcome visitors and partners. Yes to monitoring, yes to slow formation, but as equals, not as controlled entities. Fair, Sarah said, before Lorenzo could object further. We're all navigating unknown territory here. Then we begin, the house said. The Paris house has been waiting to extend its 3-hour loop. It wants to offer art classes, same 3 hours, but experienced differently by each student. Will you help me guide that connection? And so, in a conservatory that couldn't exist in a house that defied time, a partnership formed between those who monitored anomalies and an anomaly that had learned to monitor itself, though Lorenzo documented every detail, prepared to shut it all down at the first sign of danger. The work began immediately. Sarah set up equipment to track the resonance between London and Paris. Lorenzo worked with Edmund and Jonathan to understand the medical implications of temporal displacement. Keiko, despite her reservations, found herself deep in conversation with Constance about documentation methods across time periods. The child, who never gave their name, sat with Tommy and Thomas, teaching them exercises to maintain cohesion while existing in parallel. This is still dangerous, Keiko said quietly to Margot as they watched the others work. Everything worth doing is, Margot replied, but less dangerous together than alone. The Cardiff incident happened to an isolated anomaly under pressure. This is different, distributed, supported, conscious. I hope you're right. Keiko looked around the conservatory, at investigators and residents working together, at the house literally growing connections visible as golden threads in the air. Because if you're wrong, it's not just London at risk. It's the entire temporal fabric of reality. Then we'd better get it right, Daniel said, offering them both coffee that tasted of hope and tea that tasted of tradition. As he handed Margot her cup, their fingers brushed, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not temporal displacement, but something older, simpler, infinitely more complicated. Later, when the investigators had gone and the residents had dispersed, Daniel found Margot alone in the conservatory, staring at the golden threads that showed the house's growing connections. You were brilliant today, he said quietly. The way you stood up to them, protected the house, protected all of us. I was terrified, she admitted. I know, I could feel it. He moved closer, and she realized their temporal signatures weren't just harmonizing, they were synchronizing, creating a resonance that made the very air between them shimmer. That's the thing about being temporally sensitive. I can feel what you feel sometimes, when the moments align. What do you feel now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Like I'm falling through time, he said, but instead of it being frightening, it feels like flying, because I know you'll catch me, just like I'll catch you. The house hummed approval around them, and every plant in the conservatory bloomed at once, past, present, and future flowers, all opening to this one perfect moment. Daniel. We don't have to name it yet, he said gently. We have all the time in the world. Literally, but Margot, the house didn't just bring me here for sanctuary, it brought me here for you. I know, she said, and realized she'd known since that first morning when he'd stood on her doorstep with tomorrow's newspaper and scones that defied temporal logic. They stood there, hands not quite touching, hearts beating at 3:47 p.m., regardless of what the clock said, and let the moment stretch into its own small eternity. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. I hope I helped you unwind and drift a little closer to sleep. If you're enjoying these readings, there's a whole library of full books and cozy chapters waiting for you over on my Patreon. If you are already a member, then I thank you. It includes exclusive content, bonus episodes, and early access to new releases. You can also become a YouTube member, if you haven't already, to listen ad-free and explore over 280 relaxing readings anytime you like. I'd love to have you there. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next one.